Let's go back in time to the 2020 NFL season. This was the pandemic season where, of course, due to the pandemic, there were no fans in the stands, so this made games really weird. This was also the first season Tom Brady left New England and played with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and it was really weird seeing him in a New Jersey, but in his first season with his new team, he led them to the Super Bowl, and they beat the Chiefs 31-9. Even though the Chiefs lost, this was seen as a passing of the torch moment from Brady to Mahomes, as Mahomes had been dominating the NFL for the last 3 seasons, and he was seen as the next and upcoming GOAT. Sadly, we know this is the case by now. Mahomes is the next Tom Brady, but through the first 7 games of the 2021 NFL season, it honestly looked like the Chiefs were frauds. To start the first 7 games of the NFL season, the Chiefs were off to a 3-4 start, and it looked like they were pretty fraudulent. It looked like those 2018 to 2020 seasons were 3-year wonders. It looked like the rest of the league had finally caught up to them and figured out their schemes. However, it would all just be a fluke, and the Chiefs would finish 12-5 and win the AFC West. Sadly, this, along with many other things, is what makes the 2021 season so underrated. Now, the 2021 season had a lot of great things, but one thing it was without was Drew Brees, as he retired after the 2020 season ending one of the greatest NFL quarterback careers of all time. The Saints would sign Jameis Winston as Drew Brees' replacement, and they actually signed him back in 2020, so they were a little ahead of the game, and he was pretty good with the Saints in 2021, as through 7 games he led them to a 5-2 record, including beating the reigning champs in the Tampa Bay Bucks, and he also had a pretty good stat line. A little over 1,000 yards isn't that good, but 14 touchdowns to 3 interceptions was his best touchdown to interception ratio, and it still is, of his entire career. However, during that Bucks game, his season would end due to an ACL injury, meaning he was out for the entire season. However, this would spark one of the most iconic meme videos in NFL history, where they're in the locker room after the game is over and he's dancing with crutches on. Classic Jameis Winston. I'm not going to show the video here because I don't know, I might get copyright or whatever, but if you want to go check that out, go ahead. Another huge quarterback thing that happened this offseason was Jared Goff getting traded for Matthew Stafford. In years 2 and 3 with the Rams, Jared Goff wasn't all too bad. In fact, in 2018, he led the Rams to the Super Bowl, which they lost, but his decline in play and his shaky relationship with Sean McVay definitely hurt their chances at winning it all. So the Rams decided it was time to pull the plug and trade for a quarterback they could pursue a Super Bowl with better. Matthew Stafford was also a very good quarterback replacement, as he had spent 12 seasons with the Lions, and in those 12 seasons, he was putting up very good stats, or he was injured, and he spent his time on the Lions with some very bad teams. And if we can get prime Matthew Stafford on the Rams, who are already pretty good, who knows? He could lead this team to the Super Bowl, but that might just be wishful thinking. We'll see. Let's now go to the 2021 NFL Draft, and this year's draft was very interesting. The number 1 overall pick was no doubt Trevor Lawrence, and he went to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Lawrence was arguably the most hyped up quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck. He's up there with the Andrew Lucks and Peyton Mannings and John Elways when it comes up to hyped up quarterback prospects. Now, the number 1 overall pick could have been held by the New York Jets. Instead, they decided to blow their tank job and randomly win 2 games against playoff teams of all teams, and well, they had to settle for Zach Wilson from BYU, the biggest draft riser from this year. With the 3rd pick, the 49ers traded up to get Trey Lance, and honestly, this was a questionable pick at the time because you arguably had an already decent quarterback in Jimmy Garoppolo, and also you could argue that Justin Fields was a much better quarterback prospect than Trey Lance. With the 5th pick, the Bengals took receiver from LSU, Jamar Chase, and this pick had a lot of its ups and downs. The up being that obviously this was Joe Burrow's number 1 guy on the 2019 LSU team, but also you desperately needed an O-lineman to protect Joe Burrow, and there was one on the board with Penei Sewell, but instead you draft a receiver even though you already have 2 pretty good receivers in T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd, and Jamar Chase took the entire 2020 season off, so he was going to be a little bit rusty. At number 10, the Eagles would draft the Heisman winner from 2020, Devontae Smith from Alabama, and this would give their new franchise quarterback Jalen Hurts a number 1 option. At number 11, the Bears would trade up from number 20 to draft, hopefully, their franchise quarterback in Justin Fields, and at the time, in my opinion, this seemed like a really good pick. At number 12, the Cowboys would select Micah Parsons from Penn State, and not a whole lot to say, just pay attention to this guy. The last pick I'm going to be going over is at number 15, where the Patriots drafted Mac Jones from Alabama, hopefully as Tom Brady's replacement. If you don't know how this season went or you forgot, make a prediction in your head. Who do you think will be the best and who do you think will be the worst? Last thing I'm going to be talking about before we get into the season was that this is the first year the NFL expanded the regular season to 17 games, and this is going to be huge. Now, this change had a lot of its ups and downs, but one big positive from this was that stats are about to get a lot more inflated and a lot more crazy, as these were the 2019 passing leaders, and you can see Jameis Winston had over 5,000 yards, Dak Prescott came close. Now imagine this, but now with these new 17 games, there could be about 5 players who could throw for over 5,000 yards. Without further ado, let's get on to what happened in the 2021 season. To start off, this was the first game of the season, the Cowboys' first Bucks on the usual Thursday night game, and this was so beautiful to watch because this was the first game where full capacity games were back, and I don't think I always took it for granted fans being at the stands or whatever, fans being the games, because dude, this was so beautiful to see all the fans at the stadium. Absolutely beautiful, no words can describe it. The game in itself was pretty good, as the Bucks barely beat the Cowboys 31-29 on a game-winning field goal, and this was Dak Prescott's first game back from that terrible ankle injury in 2020. Now, this was the start of a very good season for the Dallas Cowboys and a stretch of 3 straight great seasons where they finished 12-5 in the regular season and won the NFC East, and this was their most wins since 2016. I said a few minutes ago that an extra regular season game was going to boost stats greatly, and that shows completely true with the 2021 Dallas Cowboys, as they were the first team in NFL history to have a quarterback in Dak Prescott throw for over 4,000 yards, a running back in Ezekiel Elliott rush for over 1,000 yards, a receiver in CeeDee Lamb received for over 1,000 yards, and Amari Cooper was pretty close as well. Micah Parsons won Defensive Rookie of the Year as he obtained 10+ sacks, and on second-year man from Alabama, Trayvon Diggs, went absolutely crazy this season, having 11 interceptions. This was my favorite Dallas Cowboys team of all time. This team was so fun to watch. You had a player to watch for every single Sunday. We had so many weapons. I mean, I went to a whole game. Probably the best choice I could have gone with, as we beat the Washington football team 56-14. Just don't ask me what happened in the playoffs. Change of topics, if you're talking about the 2021 NFL season, you have to talk about the Las Vegas Raiders. I mean, this team made the season even better. They started off very well. They went 3-0 in their first 3 games against teams who finished with a winning record the previous season, and that's the first time that had ever been done in NFL history. And 2 of those games were overtime games, so they were looking like one of the better, more clutch teams in the NFL, but then they would drop their next 2 games against the Chargers and Bears, falling to 3-2. But the day after their Week 5 game against the Chicago Bears on Monday Night Football, old emails came out against Jon Gruden saying some stuff, and during the middle of that Monday Night Football game, Jon Gruden resigned from his head coaching spot, and there's all sorts of conspiracies and stuff like that, but the main part is losing your head coach midway through the season in any circumstance is incredibly unfortunate, and this is going to be very, very difficult to overcome. Following this, the Raiders would name Rich Bisaccia as the interim head coach, and even though he wasn't the official one, he was still one of the most well-loved in the NFL, and in his first 2 games, he would lead them to back-to-back wins, and it honestly seemed like things could go up pretty well. And then something even worse happened. If you thought the Jon Gruden situation was unfortunate, well, Henry Ruggs, a receiver on the team who honestly could have been the face of the franchise in any given moment, decided to drive under the influence one night in early November and decided to drive over 150 miles per hour, killing a woman and her dog, and ruining his life in the process. A situation like this would completely derail any sports team at any level, and for a short time, it looked like this was going to be the case, as After the Raiders started 5-2, they would crumble to 6-7, and they are now on the inside or outside looking in to make the postseason. But instead of giving up or tanking or anything like that, the Raiders decided to keep on fighting, and they ended up winning out the rest of their games, finishing 10-7 and sneaking into the playoffs. This whole team, this whole season was absolutely insane. One-year wonders, ups and downs, you name it. This was the NFL's version of the 2008 Florida Gators, in my opinion. Maybe that's a stretch, I don't know. This team deserves a whole video, though. One of the craziest and most improbable teams in recent NFL history. Alright, let's go over the final regular season standings. We start off with the AFC, and the American Football Conference this season was super strange. It was just a bunch of cannibalism on different teams, and the team with the number 1 seed at the end of the year was the Tennessee Titans, despite the fact that their quarterback Ryan Tannehill played like he played mid, and Derrick Henry, their star running back, tore his ACL midway through the year. It was their defense that led them to the number 1 spot, and look, I already talked about the Chiefs and the Bills. They were just kind of similar to how they've always been for the last few years. I want to talk about the Bengals this year because this was the first season where they became pretty well known across the country. They were by far the biggest surprise this year in the NFL. Second-year man Joe Burrow had an amazing season, MVP caliber, and he won Comeback Player of the Year. I also talked about earlier about the Bengals drafting Jamar Chase and how it could be a controversial pick. Well, it turned out to be, for that season at least, the best pick they could have made, as he instantly turned into one of the league's best receivers as he eclipsed 1,455 yards and 13 touchdowns, and won Offensive Rookie of the Year. Oh, and Mac Jones, of all people, was the best rookie quarterback from 2021, not the hyped up Trevor Lawrence, not Justin Fields, Mac Jones, and he led the Patriots to a 10-7 record and a playoff berth, and at one point, it was a serious possibility that they would win the AFC East, and at one point, they were the number 1 seed in the entire AFC, and that thought just scared everyone. The Patriots, 2 years removed from Tom Brady, already being that good, that fast, that was frightening. And our last playoff team was the Pittsburgh Steelers, and like usual, they did not deserve it. Other teams deserved it, but this was Big Ben's last season as an NFL player, and TJ Watt won Defensive Player of the Year while tying the single-season sack record, and that was boosted, of course, because of the 17-game regular season. Over on the NFC, I would say it was equally as interesting, as Aaron Rodgers would lead the Packers to their second straight 1 seed, and Aaron Rodgers would win his second straight MVP and his 4th all-time. The reigning champs, the Bucs, they were good again this year. They finished with the number 2 seed and won the NFC South. We already talked about the Cowboys. Let's now go back to the Rams. I talked about the trade earlier, and the Matthew Stafford trade experiment worked out very, very well, as he had one of the best seasons of his career. Almost 5,000 yards, 41 touchdowns, 17 interceptions. That's not good, but still, he had one of the best years of his career and led the Rams to a 12-5 record and won the NFC West. But we cannot talk about this Rams team, or in fact the entire 2021 season, without mentioning Cooper Kupp, as he had one of the greatest seasons from a wide receiver all time, almost hitting 2,000 receiving yards, 16 touchdowns, 145 receptions, and winning the Triple Crown. The Cardinals' record shows that they had a good season, and for the most part they did. They started 7-0 and then started 10-2, but they would finish very, very cold, ending 11-6. Classic Cliff Kingsbury. Third-year receiver and breakout star Deebo Samuel would help lead the 49ers to a playoff berth. And then lastly, to end us off, Jalen Hurts, the second-year quarterback, would lead the Eagles to the playoffs, and they were one of the more shocking playoff teams from this year. Before we get into what happened in the postseason, let's go over some other notable things that happened during the regular season. Second-year players and receivers Justin Jefferson and running back Jonathan Taylor would lead the league in their respective yards category. Before the season began, the Jags decided to hire college football legend Urban Meyer as their head coach, and it ended very, very horribly. It deserves its own video on its own, but basically, the most toxic environment in NFL history, and after a 2-10 start, he was fired, and there's probably multiple videos about him out there, so I recommend you go watch that. The Ravens would start out to an 8-3 record, and then Lamar Jackson would get hurt, so very well-known Pro Bowler Tyler Huntley would step in, and they completely collapse, going 8-9 and missing the playoffs. The Browns were met with high expectations going into the 2021 season, but after Baker Mayfield hurt a shoulder and played through it, the Browns failed expectations. Baker Mayfield easily had the worst season of his career, and his time in Cleveland was cut short for the Browns being dumb. After starting 3-0, Sam Darnold's first season as a Carolina Panther ended in a 5-12 record, and the hunt for a quarterback for the Carolina Panthers is still on. And to end things off, the Seahawks were arguably the most disappointing team in the entire NFL this season, as Russell Wilson missed a few games due to injury, and when he came back, he couldn't elevate the Seahawks to the next level that they were supposed to be at, and Seahawks finished 7-10 in Russell Wilson's last season as a Seahawk. Okay, let's now get into the postseason. And let me just tell you, in case you forgot, or you weren't there for the 2021 season, the 2021 postseason has been the greatest postseason I have ever witnessed. Now, compared to the other rounds, the wildcard round was a little bit quiet, but the opening game, the Raiders vs. Bengals, was a really great game that ended on a game-winning deflection, and the Bengals would beat the Raiders 26-19, and the Bengals would win their first playoff game in 31 years. This wasn't a close game, but I still want to talk about it. In the wildcard round, the Bills beat the Patriots 47-14, and this was the ultimate revenge moment for the Patriots owning the Bills for 20 years plus under Tom Brady. And not only that, but during the regular season, it looked like the Patriots could have potentially taken the AFC East back already, but well, we all know how that's gone. And then the other close game, a game I hate to talk about, is the 49ers beating the Cowboys 23-17, where the Cowboys at the very end of the game could have won it if they had taken or thrown the ball to the end zone or a quick out route and then throw the ball. Instead, we decided to run it up the middle, not spiking it. I can't believe it to this day. It still makes me so mad. We should have won this game. We wasted a great team. Anyway, we now go on to the divisional round, and this is what made the playoffs so good. Every single game came down to the last play. Every single game. And both number 1 seeds got knocked out. We get started with the first game of the round, as the Cincinnati Bengals took down the number 1 seed from the AFC, the Tennessee Titans, 19-16 on a game-winning field goal by rookie Evan McPherson. Now, we all saw a loss from the Titans coming from light years away, but no one saw it coming from the young, upstart, and honestly cursed Cincinnati Bengals. And then the very next game was the Packers losing to the 49ers 13-10 on a game-winning field goal, which meant the number 1 seed from both teams were taken down in the same day. Now, the Titans, we all saw that coming, but the Packers, this was their year, it felt like, but no, apparently not. The first game of Game 2 was the Rams beating the Bucs 30-27, and I'm going to say this is the most underrated playoff game of all time. Maybe not the most, but it's definitely up there, as the Rams had a big lead for the whole game, but then the Bucs came back, tied it up at 27, and then nearing the end of the game, Matthew Stafford launched a very deep ball to Cooper Kupp, which went inside the red zone, and then that set up for a Matt Gay game-winning field goal, and the Rams won 30-24. And then to end things off, we have arguably one of the greatest playoff games of all time, as the Chiefs beat the Bills 42-36, where in the final 2 minutes of regulation, it was only 24-21, I forgot, but it was something low scoring like that, and then they just kept on trading back and forth with scores. In fact, with 13 seconds left, the Bills were up 36-33, but somehow with just 13 seconds, the Chiefs drove down the field and scored a field goal to get the game into overtime. Absolute madness. We now get onto the championship rounds, as we get started off with the Chiefs vs. Bengals, and both these teams coming into the season were on much different trajectories, as the Chiefs were seen as a Super Bowl contender entering the year. The Bengals was seen as a number 1 overall pick contender. But despite the Chiefs being heavy favorites and the Bengals being down 21-3 early on in the game, they came back and they won, going into overtime, and Evan McPherson yet again kicking a game-winning field goal. And the Bengals have overcome all of the adversity and became one of the most improbable teams to make the Super Bowl in recent memory. And then in the NFC Championship, the Rams would also come back down from a big deficit and beat the 49ers 20-17. This led to one of the most improbable and most random Super Bowls in recent NFL history. On one hand, you have the Los Angeles Rams, who took a very risky move in trading their quarterback for another quarterback in the offseason, and this quarterback they gained hadn't won a playoff game in his entire career and now was 60 minutes away from winning a Super Bowl after 13 NFL seasons. On the other hand, you have a team who had been one of the most cursed NFL teams over the past 3 decades and honestly in NFL history, as entering the season they hadn't won a playoff game since 1990. That's 31 years, and it wasn't looking like they were going to win one this season, as they were supposed to be one of the worst teams in the NFL, led by a second-year quarterback who was just coming off an injury, their top receiver being a rookie. This was an incredibly young team that was not supposed to do anything this season, yet they find themselves right here in the biggest stage in American sports. This was the most likable Super Bowl I can remember in my lifetime, and it was okay to cheer for any team. Whoever you wanted to win, that's fine. It was a good thing, unless you're a fan of one of these teams. This Super Bowl was the entire 2021 season in a nutshell, completely and honestly egregiously underrated. This game was tightly contested all game long, but in the final minutes of the game, Matthew Stafford would throw a game-winning touchdown to Cooper Kupp, and then on the very next drive, Aaron Donald would seal the deal, and the Rams would win Super Bowl 56 23-20, and that offseason trade with Matthew Stafford completely paid off. Cooper Kupp would win Super Bowl MVP, totaling stats of 8 receptions, 92 yards, and 2 touchdowns, which would cap off, in my opinion, the greatest wide receiver season of all time. And that's about it. This is my longest video yet. Bye.